Yeah, I think the thing about now is it's a real test for the media, for journalists and reporters like me, on like stick to the facts, stick to the data, follow the experts, follow the election commissioners, and all the people that are actually putting this on the ground instead of trying to guesstimate.
Hmm.
I think there are places where President Trump overperformed or Biden underperformed. Florida being one of those places, right? That was when you talk about an unexpected result. That was when they were feeling kind of confident about. But the thing that Biden, and when you talk to Biden people now, even late last night when things started looking kind of shaky, is that this is what they were actually expecting. For months, we kept hearing that, this is going to be a blowout. Politico did not say that. This is going to be a blowout. This is going to be a huge repudiation of President Trump. That is not what we have seen. I think no matter what happens with this election, at the end of the day, President Trump was able to convince enough people in this country that their lived experience, right? Their lived experience during a pandemic, during a recession, is not reality, right? Like he was able to convince enough people that, COVID-19, we're rounding the corner. I handled it well. This is the best economy I've done. I've had the best economy. I'm the best for
Hmm.
Black people. I'm the best for Latinos. I'm the best for women. He was able to convince them of that. And what that means is that the Republican Party may not, even if Trump loses, the Republican Party is not going to just, you know, wash their hands of Trumpism, right? In a way that
Right.
Joe Biden, I think, was hoping. Something that Andrew Yang said um, to me before is that, you know, Trump during the primary, that there are some of the people running, I think he was talking about Joe Biden, that think that President Trump is like um, an interlude, right? Like he is a symptom of the
A
problem,
phase.
a phase, right?
Right.
Exactly. And that is clearly not the case, right? Like if there had been this huge repudiation around the country in huge numbers of President Trump, if all of the early vote was just to Joe Biden, that's what we would have been saying. But that's not the case. And I think how this country wrestles with that is going to be fascinating and scary for a lot of people for at least maybe a decade, I think.
I
Yeah.
feel like your predictions were probably pretty close to Zach and I's, to be honest, in
Yeah.
terms of what would. But I'm curious, really curious as to what if there was one or many predictions going into election night that you were personally surprised by seeing as an outcome.
Yeah. I'm surprised about Georgia. Georgia is still really close in a way that
Yeah.
I just never believed that, Democrats were going to be able to really play there. And I think they are showing that something's happening in Georgia. Florida, the Latino vote in Florida is really surprising. It's
Miami.
some
Yeah.
Miami, hello, that underperforming by Joe Biden there is surprising to us, and also I think super concerning for Democrats moving forward, because there have ever since he was the general election candidate, Joe Biden, and the nominee, you talk to Democrats in Florida, you talk to Latino activists, and they said he needs to focus on Latinos a lot more. He needs to focus on Latinos a lot more, and they didn't really take that seriously. They started to do that toward the end, but it was clearly not
Hmm.
enough, right? And that is something that you look at the people that were at the DNC, Julian Castro, not there. You know what I mean? Like people, huge Latino names were not a part of that process and a part of that pageantry, and that matters. And I think it showed that it mattered in Florida more than Democrats thought it was going to.
There were so many. The only way I can explain them is just BS media narratives that came out of the hype up this election. And I'll
Yeah,
give Politico credit; they weren't fueling the fire anywhere near as much as some of maybe the broadcast networks and things like that. But we all got wrapped up in it, and self included. But it was in some ways. But there were narratives like Texas is in play, and Iowa's in play, and South Carolina's in play, and the narratives were fueling these, frankly, down ballot candidates too. And there were look, Jamie Harrison, who's the guy who
yep,
was running against Lindsey Graham, raised more money than he could ever, more than we did on the presidential campaign. We raised a lot,
yeah,
and there were polls showing him close to almost winning, and then like literally could not have been further from the truth. Like they called it on election night pretty early. So what is the media missing from your angle? You know what I'm saying? Like, what is it? Polling? Is it headlines? Is it clickbait? What's driving this?
I'm lucky to work at Politico, a place that doesn't, we don't always get it right. Even I know that our editors know that, like when it comes to headlines and clickbaity things. But there is so much, the media issue is that we are obsessed with drama. We are drama queens. We are messy people who love drama. And that is like at the core of what it seems like is driving a lot of the media narrative and the media conversation is that, we take one thing, one poll, a couple of polls happening in one state, and we pull that out to me like, oh my God, the election is not even close. This is going to be a blowout. It's dangerous. It is, at times really, it's disconcerting for democracy because if there isn't a media that can understand the people, right? Like if there isn't a media that can understand how people are feeling in this country, we're kind of screwed, right? I think more times than not, we are correct, right? Like I think all the reporters I know, and the more I'm in this business, the more I get to meet, and the bigger names that feels like a brag. It kind of is a humble brag, I guess. I get to meet more people.
You get to know more people. We have the same thing.
People. Yeah. Like you meet more important people who have been doing this for a really long time. And so I have never met a reporter that's like just likes the drama to like the drama or doesn't take this part of their job really seriously, right? Understanding the American people. And that's key. And I think that part is what we're losing. The polling industry is doing I'm going to get in trouble for this one. The polling industry sometimes is doing a better job of kind of explaining what they got wrong than kind of getting things right. And so in 2016, a lot of the surprise that we had was that there was, they didn't wait for education in this country. And if you were someone who was watching 2016 as much as I was as a reporter, you could tell that something was happening with white people without a college degree, right? That was something that was happening with President Trump. And so doing that, understanding the different demographics, understanding that Latinos are not a monolith, black people are not a monolith, Asian Americans are not a monolith. It's going to take more money and more resources in a way that, in this media environment where there's only so much money, right? And there's only ways to make money. That investment is going to be really intense. It should be really intense over the next years to kind of figure out what's going on in this country, because it feels like we're at an inflection point in this country in which I don't think, many of the reports I haven't seen. I'm 31, and that most reporters I talk to who've been doing this for much longer haven't seen either.
Yeah. Or go ahead, Eric, if you're going to say something. Sorry, I'm looking.
No, I think that's excellent insight, and kind of thinking about a couple of things directly that we've had the chance to kind of review over your reporting. You talked about the black vote and both Trump and Biden getting it wrong. In terms of race in this election, obviously, and Zach has mentioned this as well, in terms of folks talking about on the Democratic side using Trump being a racist as a narrative. It didn't really seem to stick if we look at the map here. Just kind of curious about some of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think the thing that Democrats do, Republicans do in elections is they hope that one message works for everyone that looks similar. They hope
it's easier that way.
It's much easier. It's less, you spend less money, on a kind of cynical level, like it makes sense, right? And in this country where we have the socioeconomic status of people being so huge in the way they see and think about the world, where they live, the kind of access to healthcare, their access to, discretionary spending, those kinds of things, you're getting a split in a lot of places, right? Like obviously Trump was never going to win the black vote, but if the only argument to black people is Donald Trump is a racist, you're not going to win that, right? Like I talked to a lot of black people throughout the year who, what I kept hearing, whether they were activists or just like normal people, was that, yeah, white people are racist. You know what I mean? Like that, they just like think that. And so it's like, okay, so if everybody's racist, why would I go vote for anybody? And so you have Joe Biden, who the author of the 1994 crime bill that disproportionately impacted black men in this country. you have, even this year when he was kind of, remembering the good old days in the Senate where he worked with segregationists. He like name checked some people who had terrible views about Black people. These are things like if you put those two candidates up against each other, there are Black people in this country who I've talked to, there's a lot of reporting on this, that are like, yeah, you're all kind of the same. You know what I mean? And so you have to give them something else. You have to give them something that is, what are you going to do for me? How do you make it better? And I think, we started seeing like Ice Cube and Lil Wayne like kind of coming out in very strange ways, Lil Pump. But the thing that's really funny is, one, just watching that frenzy around that proved that the media and Democrats see Black people as democratic, when why would we think Lil Wayne or Ice Cube are Democrats? They have never told us. We don't know that. You know what I mean? And so like they were like, oh my God, why is Lil Wayne with Donald Trump? Like, maybe he's a Republican. We don't know. He also can't vote because he's a felon. You know what I mean? So it's like we actually don't know. And so there's this there are all of these our personal biases and misunderstanding of groups of people that feed into all of this, and it pops up. And Twitter is the worst. Like Twitter is the place where all of that is happening the most. It's just like it is a cesspool of an echo chamber of an echo chamber of an echo chamber. Like most Americans aren't on there, and I think that's Democrats. You talked about like them getting excited about Texas or Georgia and all of those things. That happened a lot on Twitter, right? Like that, and if you allow Twitter to run your campaign, you're kind of screwed, because that's not where like real Americans are, quote unquote. They're real Americans, but I mean, like, like the average American's not on there, American. Right? The Hillary Clinton campaign, one of the criticisms there was that they were too much listening to the echo chamber. It seems like the Joe Biden campaign has not done that, right? We'll see how the numbers shake out, but it looks like they played a game that was based on what they knew to be true, right? The Midwest was important. He had a chance in Arizona in a way that Democrats haven't had in a very long time, and ignored. He didn't go to Texas. They sent Kamala Harris kind of in the last days. He did not go to Texas. They spent a lot more money in Georgia, you know what I mean, than Democrats have before. But they weren't concentrating so much on expanding the map, just using pipe dreams that Democrats have on how humongous states like Texas would go just off of demographics, because just looking at demographics, you don't know how voters are going to vote sometimes.
Right. One of the things
Thank you for listening in. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. If you did, please do subscribe to Yang Speaks and click on notifications so we can let you know every time we have a new episode.